Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify the marketing and the mindset so you, as chiropractors, can make more money, have a greater income, have more impact and enjoyment in practice too. Now, if you're feeling at the moment like you're lacking a bit of passion, connection, and purpose in practice, maybe in life too, then today's episode is absolutely for you. It might be one that you want to listen to a couple of times over. Now, a little more than maybe 20 years ago, I came across a chiropractor by the name of Stu Bittman, and he changed my life as a chiropractor. He embodied what it was like to live and practice chiropractic with heart. He had this incredibly calm and soothing voice that just seemed to emanate love and certainty and presence. And it's been something that I have aspired to emulate literally ever since. Now today, he's my guest on the podcast. Now, Stu and I talked about what is perhaps been the most important ingredient that has allowed him to have the tremendous career that he has had in chiropractic. I was really surprised by his answer to this as well. He shared some great stories of the old timers, and we chatted a little bit about why does it seem at the moment that chiropractors aren't seeing the miracles in practice that we used to see in the old days, 20, 30, 40 plus years ago as well. This conversation was a tremendous privilege for me, and I hope that you enjoy it too. Let's go and chat with Stu Bittman. Stu Bittman, welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I mentioned to you beforehand, it's a true honor for me to be chatting with you. You played a very important role in the early stages. 25 years as a chiropractor, and about maybe 8 or 10 years in, I came across some of your content, and there was something. It was audio I was listening to, and if there was one thing that I wanted to take on board from Stu Bittman, it was heart. And the basis behind this podcast, the work I do with community influencer, is heart-centered marketing. Let's, solve problems. Let's care for people. And man, I fell in love with you those years ago and what you had to offer. And so I have been it's just before Christmas that we're recording this, and I've had that pre-excitement just before Christmas. But
nice.
For the listeners that haven't had the pleasure that I have of a background of listening to you for many, many hours, can you perhaps bring them up to speed to where you are now, what you've done, and perhaps some context to what we'll talk about over this next 45 minutes?
Sure. I mean, first of all, when you're 65, it could take 45 minutes just to, talk about your biography. But well, we will. And you've been at it 25 years, and I was an influence on you, so I'm feeling kind of old. Anyway, I had graduated from the Los Angeles College of Chiropractic, as it was then called.
Yes.
In 1986. So what's that? 35 years ago, April. And struggled for several years because I attempted to use what I was taught in school. And I was very good at it. I was the valedictorian of my class, so I was very well steeped in what I was taught. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of chiropractic in there, shall we say, so I was left to find out at seminars. God, I'm going to try to make this quick. I started to go to Parker seminars. It's a big seminar back in the day, and that's when I was exposed to people like Sigafus, who became my main mentor. Though the first time I heard him speak at Parker, I walked out of the room because I was not quite ready for his message.
Yes.
It was very interesting to find out that when he first heard the message of chiropractic, he walked out of the room on Sid Williams many years earlier. But anyway, that was one of the connections we had. So it was in actually a lecture on quantum physics, believe it or not, many years ago, the first time I had heard it, that really kind of pointed out to me that the scientific foundation that I had based kind of my belief system on was not the most reliable thing, not the most solid thing, not the most foundational thing to base anything on. It kind of suddenly became clear to me that I didn't really have a foundation. So chiropractic philosophy, as I was exposed to it at Parker, kind of filled my heart, kind of filled my chest, which had always had a big hole in it, even with all the education and even with the wonderful grades I got. So I embarked on reading everything I could get my hands on and going to every philosophy seminar. And I saw Reggie a bunch of times. And I started to go to Sigafus's personal development workshop, started working on myself.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately started helping out at those. She taught me a lot about what I do now, about leading workshops and mentoring people. And then I participated in some mission trips, which were life-changing and career-changing. Really taught me how beautiful and pure and simple chiropractic is, especially when we don't complicate it with a bunch of head stuff and a bunch of stuff. Pretty much is all I learned about chiropractic. So these were the Panama missions that some people have heard about. The third time we adjusted 400,000 people, like 150 chiropractors, and
Wow.
in less than a week. I mean, we would show up in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, right when we were supposed to. In fact, we were the only thing in Panama that ran on time. But there were people lining up for 4 hours by the time we got there, and there would be thousands of people waiting, and all we were doing was adjusting Atlas axis, basically sitting in chairs. So these experiences were obviously incredible for me. And so the reason they were incredible for me is I made it my goal after these trips to change myself, because I know you are into heart-based and heart-centered marketing. My heart was never more engaged as it was in Panama, because my head was not really present. There was nothing to attach to. We weren't following up with people, so it wasn't about results. I couldn't speak the same language as the people, so it wasn't about them liking me or me understanding their situation. I didn't even know what was wrong with them, which was fine, because for me, chiropractic is much more about what's right with people than what's wrong with people. So
Mm.
it really allowed me incredibly set of circumstances that allowed me to just simply give and serve and love people
Mm.
and be totally present, even though it was only about 10 seconds per person.
Yes.
I learned a lot about love. I learned a lot about presence, and I decided to change myself so I could be that person in my office that I was in Panama, rather than, unfortunately, a lot of people came back from those trips and just decided that it could never be the same as it was in Panama. So, the hell with it,
Mm.
or something like that. So I'm really glad I made that choice. And because I was a different person there. I was fearless. We were just adjusting everybody in sight. As I half jokingly say, from bus drivers while they were driving the bus, which wasn't a tremendously good idea, to, drunks on the street and everybody, and maximum security prisons and
Mm.
elementary schools. And just, it was just unbelievable. So
I want
the
to let me.
change,
I
go
want to.
ahead.
I
Sorry.
want to stop on that, because this will be a new concept to some of our newer chiropractors that are listening.
Okay.
The idea that you could go to a foreign country, not speak the language, have people line up for hours, a very brief assessment, left or right, atlas or axis, adjust it sitting in the chair there, send them on their way. And while no one was charged money for it, they paid in their time of waiting for 4 hours, and many of them traveling hours to get there as well. And although there was no history and not necessarily any follow-up on it, was the result, there certainly was follow-up, because people were coming back and would share the most miraculous of stories. Can you share perhaps one that comes to mind of some of perhaps one of the results that you remember from Panama?
I remember a woman coming in one day and telling the interpreters that she had come the previous day. She didn't, for some reason, she sat in the audience and didn't get adjusted. But she watched, and she decided that night, because she was heading to kill herself from there. And she decided not to, just based on watching. So that was not even an adjustment result. Right next to me, somebody adjusted, my friend Anita adjusted somebody, just adjusted their atlas, and they got up out of their wheelchair and walked. They'd been in there, the 12-year-old boy who had never been out of the wheelchair.
Mm.
The first day we were there on the first mission, we were adjusting in this institute for disabled kids, essentially, and one of the chiropractors was working with the deaf kids. And the next morning, we were told one of the deaf girls who had gotten her hearing restored, which was kind of cool. Those of us who know that story, or that story sounds familiar in
Yes,
chiropractic.
familiar.
I had never seen that in my practice. It was, and that was very interesting. There were 18 of us on that first trip, and the only one who had ever seen a deaf person get their hearing restored was Sigafus. And so that right away made me think about what was different. What was different about us on this trip? It wasn't that the people were different, really. They may have been a little simpler or less complex in their thinking, which was good. Maybe they had less resistance around healing. Maybe they had a little more faith in things. I don't know. But I think the main thing that was different was us. Again, that just presence and that love and that simple. So it may be a new concept to not be able to do a history or talk to somebody and get amazing results. But, that is the most beautiful thing about chiropractic. The doctor, as Sigafus used to say, the greatest doctor in the universe, walked in with the patient, in the patient.
Yes.
So, that makes our job a heck of a lot easier, So, and I happen to think that a lot of the mental stuff that we get into and verbal stuff kind of interferes with the process. I am not advocating not doing a history in your office, certainly. I hope you don't hear me saying that. But there are probably some things that you do for reasons that you may not even be aware of why you do them anymore, that are not really serving all the interests of you or the patient. So
let me continue to dive into that too, because I wonder, it seems that, and I don't know, it could well be an imagination of mine, that there are less chiropractic miracles happening now than there were 40 years ago. Why do you think that might be? I mean, do you think there are less happening? And if so, why?
I think there are definitely less happening because that's our vision has shrunk. I mean, as Sigafus used to say, he knew more of the real old timers. I mean, I guess I'm one of them now. But the ones from the early days, he used to half jokingly say they would adjust gravestones and expect the people to walk. And that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but again, when you really own the idea that the greatest doctor in the universe is indeed inside that person and built that person and knows the plan for that person and certainly knows how to restore wholeness within that person, then you have a whole different set of expectations and hopes and possibilities in your mind for what can happen. So I think we as a profession have greatly limited the possibilities by holding a narrower vision than is possible, a vision of whether it's symptomatic or therapeutic or certainly just back pain oriented. And you know what? At this point in my life, I love going to somebody who can help me with my back pain. However, that is not the extent of chiropractic, and it limits. If that's our vision, that's probably what we're going to see. As D. Martini used to say, when you go to a malpractice seminar, all of a sudden you get people suing you. If you go to a shoulder seminar, you get a bunch of shoulder people. And intention is important. So I think our intention maybe has shrunk a little bit, and maybe that's why we don't see the kind of miracles we used to see. Because a lot of us would just send people out who need miracles because we don't think we can help them, or they're not a chiropractic case, or we learned in school that those people needed to be referred. There's probably a lot of reasons, but I think that's the main ones.
Yes. So with that being said, then the adjustment in my mind is clearly more than the mechanical art of me putting my hands on somebody and that input into the spine and nervous system. Certainly there needs to be great competence at it. And I've noticed the better adjuster and assessor I am, the better results I get. But clearly there's something more in the delivery of the adjustment than that as well. You've touched on a couple of times in terms of vision and intent and stuff like that too. What goes into an adjustment that produces results like the ones we've been speaking about versus the adjustment that doesn't?
My ideal adjustment is the only thing added to the adjustment is love.
Mm-hmm.
So anything else gets in the way. So love to me includes holding a positive intention for the person, but it also includes a knowing, again, the greatest doctor in the universe is in them. And it knows what they need. And I don't necessarily have any idea. So they are more of an expert on themselves than I could ever be. So that changes I'm no longer fixing, which to me is not the same as loving. Fixing is more of a head thing. Loving is more of a heart thing. If I can just connect with this person and connect with myself and deliver nothing, again, with no thought about the last person I adjusted who maybe said something I didn't like, or what my wife said to me as I left the office that morning, or what I'm doing later. So again, in Panama, it was kind of easy because it was 8 seconds or a half a minute. But on the other hand, it was hot and it was noisy and there were kids climbing up my leg. So, if I can hold presence for 10 seconds with somebody, I can do it for a couple of minutes too, especially when, I could actually say something to this person now and then. So BJ talked about the adjustment with that little something extra. For me, that little something extra is presence, is love, is intention, is carrying as few of my own agendas and expectations and attachments into that experience as possible.
Many of our listeners will have had the experience where they go into work. In fact, we had some great friends of ours over for dinner the other night. And as I mentioned before, we're coming into Christmas. There's a lot of distraction. And she was saying, you want to talk about how to crash an afternoon in work? She goes, clearly I was distracted. I'm tired at the end of the year. She said, half of my patients disappeared as the afternoon went on. So we've often had that experience. And many of us have had the flip side of that as well, of where we've gone into work and people have just appeared from nowhere. How do you maintain that when there is life? Because particularly at the moment, we're end of 2021 recording this. There's a few distractions going on there too. How do you maintain that present time certainty, that loving service that Jim Parker would talk about?
It takes some self-work. It takes filling yourself up. I mean, chiropractors generally are wonderful giving people. Mm-hmm. And yet I've known many, including myself, not anymore, who gave, what's the expression? To give until it hurts.
Right. Yeah.
To give until you're tapped out, burnt out, frustrated, resentful. I've been there, folks, and it's not healthy for anybody. So I think a big part of it is having tools and practices that fill your emotional gas tank, that keep you full. I used to think selfless giving was the way to go, but selfless leaves me out of the equation. So I prefer like self-full, fill myself up. So that means doing things that nurture my soul, and obviously things like meditation and gratitude work, all things that I advocate heavily, that I have done now for a long time. Yes. 30 years as a daily practice. So, and I know that may sound horrible for some people, like, oh, I have to do all that stuff, but I've had very few moments of doing any of that where it didn't bring joy, or it didn't bring more peace, or it didn't bring, it's a pleasant thing I'm suggesting here. It's good to take time in your day and get quiet. It's good to take time in your day and fill yourself up and visualize the kind of day you want to have. That was Sigafus's big gift to us. He said, don't let your feet hit the ground in the morning until you've seen your day the way you want to see it. And again, this is all about establishing a state of consciousness that is a win-win for everybody. For everybody that you meet, for everybody you touch, for everybody you interact with, they're going to get a lot more from it if you're coming from a more full place than if you're coming from a tapped out place, or a have to place, or a should place, or any of those places.
Yeah, so I also have experienced that resentment that comes from selfless service of too long hours, of an inability to say no, from the want to serve and to be used up. It came at a tremendous cost to me, in lots of different areas, in my part of my first marriage, areas of my health, all of those things there too. And I think it is one thing that if, and I know it's very cliche and it's hard to, but there's a reason why the old saying of, put your seatbelt on first. If we want longevity in practice and we want to be able to continue to be serving people for a long time.
It's
you talked
heck
about
of a lot more fun too.
Yeah, totally.
Much more fun.
You talked about meditation and gratitude work.
Mm-hmm.
What else has helped you to stay full? And what else, the work that you're doing with chiropractors in leadership and helping to serve them, what other things can our listeners do to make sure that their cup is full before they start trying to serve others?
Well, let's not just bypass gratitude work, because according to the happiness scientists, which is a funny concept to me, I wonder whether they're happy studying happiness, but I like to think so and hope so. But anyway, according to them, the only daily practice that has been shown objectively to lead to an prolonged increase of happiness in life is a daily gratitude practice. And it's so easy, and it doesn't even matter what form it takes. I just am of the strong belief that most of us do not give ourselves enough credit. that most of us know a lot of stuff about ourselves that perhaps we're not crazy about, and think that if everybody else knew it, they wouldn't be crazy about us either. And so therefore maybe we don't deserve, or we don't, I just think we beat ourselves up. I don't know about Australia, but I think it's the national pastime in the United States. And I was one of these people. I guess I was operating under the belief that if I beat myself up maybe just this one more time, then I would be okay.
Yeah.
But I realized at some point that I cannot beat myself up enough to ever be okay, or to ever feel good about myself. So yeah, affirmations, setting intentions. I do all this. I used to do a lot of journaling, where I was mostly about getting rid of the other, or letting the other voices have their say, so I could just, get past that and get into my heart. I do a lot of Heart Math Institute practices, which involve a lot of breathing into the heart and holding, some kind of positive, what they call now regenerative feelings, such as gratitude or joy or compassion. I do a lot, and a lot of these things are kind of automatic now. It's sort of, when students ask me to teach an adjusting thing for 4 hours, and I'm like, how can I check them and adjust them into 4 hours? Because it's not broken down anymore in my mind. But I think most of us have some idea of what tools and practices we could do that make us come alive, or that give us some peace, or give us some joy, or access our heart. And any one of these is going to fill our emotional, mental, and spiritual and physical gas tank. So, it's a different experience when you take a drive with an empty gas tank as opposed to a full gas tank. I think most people can relate to that.
What a great analogy.
Yeah.
It is. You mentioned before, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and with the mastermind group that I'm teaching a part of, there is, often this background conversation of, I don't know what I need to do. And as you mentioned earlier on, we talked about that the best doctor is actually the one inside of us there too. And I think there's very little value in telling ourselves, I don't know. And I think it's self-perpetuating, because when you tell yourself, I don't know, then it just reinforces that you don't know. You talked about John DeMartini beforehand saying that we go along to a malpractice and focus on malpractice, and that's what we see. I think our brain will find the answers that it looks for. And so maybe for some of our listeners, the idea of kind of meditation and gratitude sounds like the worst, but maybe for you, it's, a walk Maybe it's playing with your dog. Maybe it's time with the kids there too. I think just checking in. And then the other thought along that too is that maybe you might need to test some things over this next 12 months, 24 months, find out really what it is that kind of works for you as well. You've touched on a couple of times the mentor that helped you out in Jim Sigafus, who, God bless him, is no longer with us anymore. I feel very grateful that I got to be with Jim numerous times on his trips over here to Australia as well. Share a little to our audience about who Jim Sigafus is, and perhaps one of your favorite stories of Jim.
I have to think about, I have to make sure it's appropriate.
No, well, there's nothing that's inappropriate. You're talking to an Aussie here, Stu. So work your hardest to try and upset me, okay?
Oh, gosh. Who was Jim Sigafus? Well, when I first saw him, he was on stage and he scared me, like I said, and he pissed me off because he was not politically correct.
What was he saying? Can you remember what he was sharing?
I remember the exact words.
Please share.
That sent me out of the room. Oh, he'd been talking about how the body could, how we could heal ourselves of any disease known to man. I was just thinking, I was halfway out of my seat at that point. But then when he started talking about how we use physical therapy and stuff just because we have no faith in the principle and we do it to justify our fees, I had just purchased or leased this beautiful ultrasound high voltage galvanic combination unit that I thought was really the meaning of life and the secret of health for people. So that upset me. I was ultimately to give that machine away, just like he used to talk about doing in his practice. So he was an amazing speaker. He was a fiery speaker. He was a very funny speaker. You would think that he didn't have a fear or a doubt or a shred of anything in his life. But I got to tell you, and it doesn't matter whether it's appropriate, as you say, I got to know him very well. And he, in many ways, he was just like you and me, as I imagine you probably noticed. And he was actually a rather shy individual. He needed his space and time, and yet somehow that made him even more special to me. It wasn't like he was born, he came out of the womb like speaking these incredible gems of truth. He worked at it. He overcame a lot of stuff to be the Sigafus that we all, wanted to be. And I will also tell you that he had a huge heart. Maybe that's why he got away with a lot of his heart getting damaged and was all right for a while. He was, and as far as the philosophy of chiropractic goes, I've never heard anybody speak about it with more eloquence or fire or passion or inspiration or truth. He was one of a kind. He was, to me, the best speaker we've had in the profession. And then, a beautiful man and a beautiful friend and a loving father and grandfather, and choked with fear. I will tell you this, a lot of the stuff I ended up knowing about him was because I got to know his wife. Right. So she would tell me the truth about a lot of things. So I took that into my coaching. I often insist on talking to the wives after a while if I don't feel like I'm getting the whole story, and it's proven to be a very valuable thing. But in this case, Patsy told me that the first time Sigafus was famous for his chicken dinner open houses. I don't know if you ever heard him talking about that.
No. He
caught a lot of flack about that. He would get hundreds and hundreds of people. He would just cook chicken for the whole community. He was like miles out of town. There's no way he should have had the biggest practice in the world, but he did. And many times he would fire it up by having a free chicken open house, and he would like x-ray everybody. But the first time he did it, and he put a big ad in the paper, Patsy, his wife, told me he didn't leave the house for a week because he was embarrassed that somebody might see him.
Right.
So it was just a big lesson for me in what he taught, which was to, as he used to say, act with faith or walk by faith, not by sight. Like act as if was a big thing he would say. Like he started talking strongly about chiropractic before he even totally believed it or owned it himself.
Yes.
And this was obviously a piece of evidence of that. He's willing to x-ray 100 200 people, but he's scared of running into him at the post office because they might see the guy who's putting this ad out. So yeah, so this is just to me the epitome of just like you and me, had the same fears and doubts, and yet from 1968 until the day he died, he traveled this world and this country advocating for what we love, and in many places that he was not exactly welcome necessarily, or like people were like-minded, but he just continued to do his thing, maybe 46, 48 weekends a year. Pretty amazing dedication.
One of the things I often think is a shame, having had the the honor to have spent time with people like Jim and yourself and many other leaders in the chiropractic profession there too. There is a facade that many of us can put on, that life is always golden. I've got it sorted out and there's never any problems in my life. And I think it's a terrible disservice, because I think I remember sitting in the crowd looking at many of these larger than life characters thinking I could never be like that because I have this and that going on in my life. And it wasn't until I realized that everybody up on stage has a front of stage and a back of stage, and they eat like I eat. They go to the bathroom like I do too. Sometimes they have difficulties with their wife and kids also. And so, Jim was, nice to hear that he, again, was having a human experience like the rest of us were as well. He was an incredibly intuitive man. Can you, and you will do a better job telling this story, because he liked to collect paintings, Indians. You remember him telling the story about him driving one day and just randomly pulling over to, can you share that story?
I ended up seeing the Indian in his house.
Yes.
So I knew at least the part of the story where he got it was true. Yes, he just had a hit. He was walking. I think he was at a seminar, he said, or he was waiting for somebody to take him to the airport. I can't remember the exact details of that, but he walked into this store and he knew his Indian was there. He'd been looking for this painting, I guess, for a long time. And the clerk kept insisting they don't have anything like that. And Sig says, yes, you do. So finally he walked into the storeroom with the guy, and there it is. There he is. So yes, you're right. He was an amazing. He showed me a list when I was at his house in Florida. He pulled out a piece of paper of something he had written when he had a vision of this house. When he was living in Pennsylvania with snow up to his eyeballs. And he had this vision of living by the water in Florida. And he has this whole piece of paper, and it was described to a T, as we say here. I mean, every detail of this house was exactly how he had pictured it and had envisioned it over the years. So he was. And when we were in a different town, I mean, this was pre-Google Maps and GPS, but he wouldn't even let me stop for directions, or, he just said, let innate guide you, and sure enough, we always found the Starbucks or whatever he was looking for. He was a big Starbucks guy towards the end. So yeah, he was awesome. He was awesome. So to go back to something you said before, we all have these abilities. So whether you call it meditation or taking a walk or playing the guitar or just getting present or being in nature, how much of an opportunity do we give ourselves to even listen to the greatest doctor in the universe, the great guidance system in the universe that is right inside of us. And as he taught us, I think it's talking to us all the time. And the more we listen and the more we act on it, and not say, well, shoot, that's crazy, that won't work, that's never worked, what would so and so think? I've done that many times too. I had a great inspiration like he had and just talked myself out of it. So, but the more we act on those, I think the more clear we get, and or the clearer reception we get to that voice. So,
my problem, Stu, is not hearing the voice, it's listening to it. So
I hear you. Yes.
That's the challenge, is having the faith and the confidence, the trust, to take that and then be able to kind of travel forwards from it as well. The name of this podcast, the Marketing Your Practice podcast, and we spend a lot of time talking about marketing, social media, websites, all those kind of things. And a lot of that, most of that, all of that didn't exist when you started your practice. In fact, it didn't exist when I started mine as well. And we sometimes artificially divide marketing into internal and external. And you were able to build a tremendous practice without any of those things as well. How was it that you were able to build such an impactful practice without any of those external marketing things that many people have today?
I believe I don't really have the formula, but I believe it was because people felt empowered.
Mm-hmm.
People felt safe. People felt hopeful. People felt like I cared and I was present. And people also picked up on the fact that I wasn't fixing them, that I didn't have agendas, that it was their highest vision that I was most interested in helping to unfold or facilitate. And I asked for referrals.
Yes.
And that's just a catchphrase. I didn't really ask for referrals. I recruited people to help me with my mission.
Yes.
I said, if you because we did a pre-care mandatory talk, so they heard all about it before they ever got adjusted. So it was was the first time I would say, if that sounds like something that would be beneficial, I did a little Reggie thing there where Reggie would say, picture the cop on the street and the teacher teaching your kids and the politicians making the stupid choices right now. Picture these people operating without interference, at their peak potential and whole and sane. And so, I need help recruiting, because we're trying to build a community and a world that we want to live in.
Yes.
And so that was a lot easier for me to talk about than, please tell everybody. So when people got engaged in what was going on, people naturally want to contribute to something big like that, and they love sharing good news with people. So it just took off. It was just mostly a referral thing. We also attempted to build community. We had a lot of events going on in the office that were opportunities for people to bring friends and family to be exposed to the energy. I did a lot of things to stimulate internal referrals, but yeah. And when I asked, it was also, I brought it up I didn't really do a report of findings, but in my version of the report of findings, I would bring it up again as, okay, these are the things you're getting from me, and these are the things I expect from you. And one of those was, again, to help us with our mission and share the good news. And everybody loved that. I really think a lot of people, a lot of chiropractors, their patients just don't know that referring people is a good thing. It is something that would be beneficial, not only for everybody, because obviously some people don't want to refer because they may not get their chair in the waiting room, or they think the doctor won't have enough time for them. But most chiropractors realize, at least I found out, that when you're higher energy, when you're seeing people, when you're moving, when you're in your heart, time expands. And it's, I'm sure you experience. I started seeing 10, 20 people a day, and I'd come home and I could barely move. And later on, when I was seeing 150 or 200 a day, I was going dancing at night. It sounds paradoxical, but it's how it works.
It's a very different experience. I think sometimes we can get kind of hung up on marketing tactics. Social media is a tactic. A website is a tactic. Having people come for a big chicken dinner is a tactic.
Yes,
underneath all of it really is a strategy to build trust, to have more people know you, like you, and trust you. And when you show up that way, the actual tactic isn't important. What social media will change next year, and certainly will be very different in 10 years time as well. But if you can just hold on to the idea that the more people in your community who know you, like you, and trust you, the busier your practice will be. And then just choose a tactic that's fun for you. Whatever it is that kind of works. I'm interested in, you mentioned one of the things that you worked hard on was empowering your patients. What does that mean, and how did you do that?
The phrase, the words that more people repeated back to me that made a difference for them than any other were that they were the ones doing the healing. I mean, simple as that. That's a very empowering thing. I know a lot of people will say, well, I kind of know that, but they were very moved by just those words. So I would recommend using those words.
Yeah.
For chiropractors to tell that you're the one doing the healing. In fact, there was a period of time there where I was calling people Dr. Jones, Dr. Smith, and they were calling me Stu.
Yes.
That was a bit extreme, but again, I was working on embracing this too. So I just wanted to add something to what you said, because it was beautiful about why we market. But also keep in mind that every single person that comes to know you and trust you and get your care is like going to be a different person, and they're going to contribute more to our society, and they're going to light up, and they're going to light up 100 people they know. So for me, marketing is about keeping in mind who you're doing it for and why you're doing it. Right? Yes, it's wonderful to have more income. It's wonderful to be fulfilled in life. And yet, as Jim Parker would say, that's a byproduct. That's the byproduct of services rendered. He used to even give us these money clips that said money is a byproduct of services rendered. And that's the kind of mindset I think that really helps grow a practice. It's like, folks, people need you more than you need them. And I know when you're starting out, that's kind of a hard thing to get your head around. But what you have in your hands and your heart is definitely life and world changing, and certainly people changing.
I think
so.
The stories we tell ourselves are incredibly impactful. There is that parable of the bricklayers where one person's laying bricks, the next is building a beautiful wall, and then the third person is building a temple or a church. Now, they're all doing the same thing, working on the same job site, but one of them sees great meaning, or they each see more meaning as well. And we have this thing as a chiropractor also. I remember being quite shocked about it once, Stu. There was a lovely flight attendant who I looked after, and she came to see me because she had terrible sciatica and, excuse me, had not been able to work full time for a long time before coming to see me. And she got adjusted, and like many people do, she felt a whole bunch better. And I was flying one time and managed to get on the same flight as Sue. And as I walked into the plane, Sue introduced me to the other people on the plane as, this is the man that saved my life. And I went, no, I helped you with your sciatica. And I went, she was able to work another 20 years because of the work that we did.
That's beautiful.
And again, it's just another way at looking at, am I laying bricks? Am I building a wall, or am I building a cathedral there? Each of our listeners, maybe you might be saying, well, I'm not seeing deaf people hear again, or people get out of a wheelchair. And I don't know that we need to see those things to feel that you're changing the world. As I shared that story about Sue there too, I do get a bit cranky sometimes that some of the more vitalistic chiropractors will really poo-poo back pain. And I love looking after people with back pain. It's not limited to what I do as a chiropractor, but Sue told me and shared with me how that saved her life as well. So as we kind of wind things up, Stu, if you have thousands of chiropractors that are listening to you now, young and old, not on a stage like you used to beforehand, in this new digital world of ours too, what would you like to share with them? What would be your parting gift that you would give them going forwards?
To know that you are more than enough.
Yeah.
I think everybody is, but especially chiropractors, because I'm a bit prejudiced. I just to stand tall and to speak your truth. And, because right now, I think if it wasn't for chiropractic offices around the world, it would be a lot darker. I think chiropractic offices have been like safe havens. I think they've been like lighthouses. And I think we've been, about the only people advocating for sanity and truth and all the things that a lot of people believed prior to March of 2020. So, I just hope you're proud, even if you don't feel like you've stood up the way you could have or have done everything that you could have. Just know that, you do. You'll never know the impact that you've had on people's lives. It's really nice that you got that opportunity to hear that from Stu. But most chiropractors don't hear any of this stuff until they either retire or they go to move or something.
Yeah.
So just know that there's many, many people who you may never hear about it. That's kind of one of the sad things about chiropractic. But yeah, you are a stellar citizen, and even if the world seems dark, I know that things would be a lot worse if it wasn't for chiropractic and chiropractors. So that's probably what's most alive in me to say. Don't ever think you're a second-class citizen of any kind.
Beautiful words.
Thank you.
Stu, where do our listeners find you and perhaps work out how they can work with you, some of the work that you're doing forwards? What's the best spot for them to get in contact?
Stu Bittman, STEW, Bittman, BITTMAN on Facebook. I have a podcast. It's called Stu on This with dashes, STEW-on-this.
Yes.
It's different from yours, Angus. It's only about 7 or 8 minutes, and it's just me giving a little of my heart droppings, as I call them. I'm only on about 110 episodes, so I'm behind you.
You'll catch.
I have a free webinar coming up beginning of February. So if you're interested in that, contact me on Facebook. I'm easy to find.
Beautiful.
And
I'll make sure I have all those links in the show notes there as well.
Thank you, my friend.
I would encourage, I will certainly be getting on board with your podcast. I have learned so much from you and looking forward to consuming more as well. Stu, all the best for 2022. And I look forward to chatting again and listening to you more now I know that I can as well. Thanks for joining us on the Marketing Your Practice podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for all you do.
See you soon, mate.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.